Captain Jake Morrison pressed his face against the cold metal of the observation deck window and stared at the enemy ships that surrounded Earth like a deadly necklace of crystal and steel. 3 months had passed since the aliens arrived, and nothing had changed except the growing desperation in his chest and the dwindling food supplies in the storage bays of New Horizons Station. The alien vessels hung in space like frozen diamonds, each one the size of a city, and each one pointed directly at his home planet below. The Kethvar Empire had come without warning on a Tuesday morning in March. Their ships simply appeared in Earth's orbit as if they had always been there, and within hours they had destroyed every satellite, every space station, and every human vessel that tried to leave the atmosphere. Jake remembered watching the feed from the surface as the aliens used some kind of gravity weapon to crush the International Space Station into a ball of twisted metal and screaming people. He had been lucky to be stationed on New Horizon at the edge of Earth's gravity well when the attack began. Now he commanded the last human outpost in space with 200 survivors who looked to him for answers he did not have. Engineer Lisa Campbell worked day and night trying to keep their aging systems running while Tactical Officer Rick Barnes monitored the alien transmissions that filled the radio spectrum with their strange musical language. The aliens seemed content to wait and watch as Earth slowly died beneath their iron ring of ships. Down on the planet's surface, Admiral Katie Brooks coordinated what remained of Earth's defense forces from a bunker hidden somewhere in the Rocky Mountains. Her messages came through sporadically when the alien jamming systems allowed, and each transmission brought worse news. Food riots in the major cities, government collapse in South America, nuclear power plants shutting down across Europe as technicians fled their posts. The aliens had made their intentions clear in their first broadcast to Earth. Dr. Alex Turner had spent weeks translating their message, and the words still echoed in Jake's mind like a death sentence. Humanity was a chaotic species that threatened the order of the galaxy. They would be contained on their homeworld until they learned to behave properly or until they destroyed themselves. The choice was theirs to make. Jake walked through the cramped corridors of New Horizon and tried to project confidence he did not feel. The station had been designed to house 50 people for 6 months, but now it held 4 times that number with supplies running dangerously low. The recycling systems worked overtime to process their waste, and the air had taken on a stale metallic taste that reminded everyone of their desperate situation. In the communications bay, Rick Barnes hunched over his equipment and listened to alien chatter with the intensity of a man possessed. He had learned to recognize different types of transmissions, even without understanding the language. Battle commands sounded different from status reports, and both sounded different from the strange, harmonious songs the aliens broadcast during what seemed to be their rest periods. Lisa Campbell emerged from the engineering section with grease on her hands and exhaustion in her eyes. She had been trying to boost their long-range sensors to get a better look at the alien ships, but every attempt resulted in the same frustrating conclusion. The enemy vessels were built from materials that human science could barely comprehend, and they operated on principles that made no sense according to Earth's understanding of physics. The gravity weapons were the worst part. Jake had watched through his telescopes as alien ships used focused gravity fields to pluck human aircraft from the sky like a child picking flowers. The weapons required no ammunition and left no trace except the twisted wreckage of whatever they touched. Against such technology, humanity's missiles and railguns seemed as primitive as stone axes, but the aliens were not trying to destroy Earth completely. They could have turned the planet into space dust within hours, if that had been their goal. Instead, they maintained their blockade and waited for something that Jake could not understand. Their behavior suggested patience beyond human comprehension, as if they had all the time in the universe to watch and wait for humanity to surrender or collapse. The worst part was the silence from the other human colonies. Mars base had gone. Dark 3 days after the siege began, and the mining stations in the asteroid belt had simply vanished from all communication channels. Jake suspected that other alien fleets had dealt with humanity's off-world settlements, while the main force focused on Earth. Humanity's dream of spreading across the solar system had ended before it truly began. As Jake returned to the command center, he found Rick Barnes frantically adjusting his radio equipment. The young officer's face was pale with excitement or fear. The alien transmissions had changed patterns suddenly, and new signals were coming from different directions. Something was happening in the enemy fleet, and Jake felt his stomach tighten with dread. After 3 months of waiting, the aliens were finally ready to make their next move. The tunnels beneath Chicago stretched for miles in every direction, like the veins of some massive underground creature that fed on human desperation and hope in equal measure. Dr. Nina Walsh walked through the main corridor of Project Phoenix and tried not to think about the tons of rubble and twisted steel that separated her from the sky. The alien bombardment had turned the city above into a wasteland, but down here in the depths, humanity's brightest minds worked to turn the tide of war. Marine Colonel Steve Parker checked his weapon for the 3rd time and nodded to his team as they prepared for another surface mission. The elevator ride to ground level always felt like ascending into hell, but the wreckage above contained alien technology that might hold the key to Earth's survival. Demolitions expert Tony Garcia carried enough explosives to level a city block, while sniper Amy Clark cleaned her rifle with the methodical precision of someone who had learned to kill at impossible distances. The surface missions had become routine over the past month. Parker's teams would emerge from hidden tunnel entrances under cover of darkness and scavenge through the ruins of alien crash sites. The enemy ships that had fallen during the initial invasion contained materials that human science could barely understand, but Dr. Walsh and her team of international researchers had made surprising progress in reverse engineering the technology. In the depths of the facility, computer specialist Ben Foster hunched over banks of monitors that displayed streams of intercepted alien communications. The enemy used quantum encryption that should have been impossible to break, but human ingenuity had found ways to peek through the cracks. What Foster discovered in those stolen messages painted a picture of an alien alliance that was far from unified. The Kethvar Empire consisted of 3 distinct species that had formed their coalition through conquest rather than cooperation. The crystalline Veltar dominated the alliance with their superior technology and cold logic. The insectoid Zeph High served as soldiers and shock troops with their aggressive nature barely held in check by Veltar discipline. The gaseous Morthdal provided strategic planning and long-term thinking, but their alien psychology made them difficult for the other species to understand. Dr. Walsh examined the latest batch of alien components that Parker's team had recovered from a crashed scout ship near Lake Michigan. The materials defied easy classification as they seemed to exist in multiple states of matter simultaneously. Crystals that bent light in impossible ways, metals that conducted electricity without resistance, organic compounds that displayed properties of both living tissue and advanced electronics. The breakthrough came when Walsh realized that alien technology operated on principles of harmony and efficiency. Every component worked in perfect synchronization with every other component. There was no redundancy, no backup systems, and no tolerance for chaos or disorder. The elegant alien designs achieved maximum effect with minimum energy, but they also created vulnerabilities that cruder human technology might exploit. Parker's team returned from their latest mission with news that changed everything. During their reconnaissance of the alien positions, they had detected strange energy fluctuations in the gravity weapons. The massive devices that kept Earth's population trapped on their home world required enormous amounts of power and created detectable quantum signatures when they operated at full capacity. Amy Clark had observed the patterns through her sniper scope while hidden in the ruins of a skyscraper. The alien weapons charged up in predictable cycles, and during the brief moments between charges, they became vulnerable to interference. Tony Garcia's demolitions expertise suggested that a precisely timed electromagnetic pulse might disrupt the charging sequence and cause the weapons to malfunction. Ben Foster's intelligence gathering revealed even more encouraging news. The alien alliance was showing signs of strain as different species disagreed about how to handle the human problem. The Veltar preferred the current siege strategy that would slowly strangle humanity without risking alien casualties. The HFY grew impatient with the waiting and wanted to launch a full-scale invasion. The Morth Doll seemed to favor complete extermination of the human species to prevent future problems. These disagreements created opportunities for human exploitation. Foster had identified communication patterns that suggested heated debates between alien commanders. The different species used different encryption protocols, and occasionally their messages contained contradictory orders or conflicting strategic assessments. Dr. Walsh began coordinating with the other underground facilities that had survived the initial bombardment. Hidden bases in Australia and northern Canada reported similar discoveries about alien technology. Scientists in a facility beneath the Swiss Alps had successfully created a small-scale gravity manipulator using salvaged alien components. Researchers in a converted mine shaft in South Africa had developed new materials that could resist alien energy weapons. The various underground teams started sharing information through a network of modified mining equipment that the aliens had not bothered to destroy. The communication system was slow and unreliable, but it allowed humanity's scattered survivors to coordinate their efforts for the first time since the siege began. Colonel Parker proposed an ambitious plan to establish contact with Captain Morrison's orbital station. The risks were enormous because any transmission powerful enough to reach space would certainly be detected by alien monitoring systems. But Parker believed they could modify a radio telescope that had survived the bombardment and use it to send a brief burst transmission during one of the alien weapon charging cycles. The message would need to be short and encoded in a way that Morrison would recognize, but the aliens would dismiss as random interference. Foster suggested using mathematical sequences based on human music, which would be meaningless to alien intelligence, but familiar to any human operator who had trained on Earth communication protocols. As the underground teams prepared for their most dangerous mission yet, Dr. Walsh felt something she had not experienced since the siege began. Hope flickered in her chest like a candle flame in a storm. Humanity might be trapped and outgunned, but they were far from defeated. The aliens had made one crucial mistake in their calculations. They had underestimated the human capacity for adaptation and the dangerous creativity that emerged when people had nothing left to lose. Dr. Sarah Kim woke up in a cage made of crystalline bars that hummed with alien energy and cast rainbow patterns on the metal floor of her prison. The Kethvar had been taking humans from settlements around the world for the past 2 weeks, and she was one of 50 people now held in what appeared to be a research facility aboard one of their massive ships. The aliens observed their human captives with the detached curiosity of scientists studying interesting bacteria under a microscope. The capture had happened during a supply run to an abandoned grocery store in the ruins of Portland. Sarah had been part of a small group of survivors who had hidden in the city's underground tunnels when the siege began. The aliens had used some kind of sleep gas to knock out the entire scavenging party. And when Sarah woke up, she found herself floating in the cargo hold of an alien transport vessel. Now she spent her days being studied by creatures that looked like walking prisms crossed with geometric nightmares. The Veltar moved with precise mechanical motions and communicated through patterns of light that flickered across their crystalline surfaces. They seemed fascinated by human behavior, especially the ways that people reacted to stress and uncertainty. The aliens had created elaborate test scenarios to observe human responses. They would introduce problems into the holding area and watch how the prisoners worked together to solve them. When the food dispenser broke down, the humans immediately organized repair teams and backup plans. When the air circulation system began making strange noises. People started rationing oxygen and preparing for the worst. What puzzled the Veltar most was human unpredictability. Their own society operated according to strict logical hierarchies where every individual knew their exact place and function. They could not understand how humans could cooperate without clear chains of command, or how they could make effective decisions based on emotion rather than pure logic. Sarah's background in psychology gave her unique insights into the alien mindset. She began to understand that the Kethvar Empire functioned like a vast machine where every component had a predetermined role. The Veltar had conquered other species by analyzing their behavior patterns and developing countermeasures based on logical predictions. But humans kept doing things that made no sense according to alien calculations. The breakthrough came when Sarah observed how the aliens reacted to human art and music. One of the prisoners had been humming a folk song while working on a broken water recycler, and the Veltar observers had become visibly agitated. Their light patterns shifted to rapid, chaotic flickers, as if the simple melody had somehow damaged their thought processes. Sarah realized that human creativity and emotional expression represented a form of chaos that the aliens could not process or predict. Where the Kethvar valued order and efficiency above all else, humans thrived on variation and spontaneity. This fundamental difference might be the key to resistance, rather than a weakness to be overcome. Meanwhile, on New Horizons station engineer, Lisa Campbell made her own discoveries about the differences between human and alien technology. The salvaged alien components that Colonel Parker's teams had smuggled up from Earth operated with flawless precision, but they were also incredibly fragile. Any deviation from optimal conditions caused immediate system failures. Human technology, by contrast, was built to handle abuse and keep functioning under terrible conditions. Earth's machines used redundant systems, backup power sources, and crude but reliable components that could be repaired with basic tools. The aliens had never encountered technology that was deliberately overbuilt and inefficient by their standards. Campbell began experimenting with hybrid systems that combined alien precision with human redundancy. The results were promising but unpredictable. Sometimes the hybrid devices worked better than either technology alone, and sometimes they failed spectacularly in ways that neither human nor alien engineers could explain. Captain Morrison received the coded transmission from Earth during one of his routine monitoring sessions. The message came as a brief burst of static during an alien weapon charging cycle, and at first he dismissed it as interference. But Tactical Officer Rick Barnes recognized the mathematical pattern hidden in the noise and realized they were hearing from the underground resistance. The communication was fragmentary and took hours to decode properly. Dr. Walsh's team had discovered critical weaknesses in alien gravity weapons, and they needed Morrison's help to coordinate a global response. The plan was ambitious beyond anything humans had attempted before, and the timing would need to be perfect, across multiple time zones and resistance cells. On Earth, Colonel Parker's guerrilla teams began implementing new tactics based on Sarah Kim's psychological insights. Instead of trying to outfight the aliens, they focused on confusing them. They used random attack patterns that defied tactical logic. They abandoned strategic positions for no apparent reason. They made decisions based on coin flips and emotional impulses rather than military doctrine. The results were remarkable. Alien forces that had easily defeated conventional human tactics began making mistakes when faced with chaotic human behavior. Their predictive algorithms failed when humans acted irrationally, and their command structures faltered when they could not anticipate enemy movements. Demolitions expert Tony Garcia discovered that alien technology was vulnerable to electromagnetic interference in ways that human equipment was not. A simple radio transmitter operating on the wrong frequency could disrupt alien sensors for miles around. Crude jamming devices built from scavenged electronics could blind alien surveillance systems completely. Sniper Amy Clark found that alien Soldiers relied heavily on their sophisticated targeting computers and became much less effective when those systems were disrupted. The crystal beings that served as infantry moved with mechanical precision when their equipment functioned properly, but became clumsy and confused when forced to rely on their own senses. The underground resistance networks began sharing these discoveries through their hidden communication channels. Scientists in facilities around the world started developing new weapons and tactics based on the principle of controlled chaos. They built devices that generated random interference patterns. They created weapons that operated in deliberately unpredictable ways. They trained soldiers to abandon standard military thinking and embrace creative disorder. Dr. Nina Walsh coordinated the growing network of human resistance from her underground laboratory and felt the tide of war beginning to shift. The aliens had technological superiority and overwhelming firepower, but they had made a crucial error in their strategic thinking. They had assumed that order would always triumph over chaos, and that logical beings would always defeat irrational. One's humanity was about to prove them wrong in the most spectacular way possible. The alien coalition began to fracture like ice under pressure as tensions between the three species reached dangerous levels. Captain Morrison watched through his telescopes as Kethvar ships changed positions in orbit and new energy signatures appeared on his sensors. Computer specialist Ben Foster's intercepted transmissions revealed heated arguments between alien commanders who could no longer agree on how to handle the human problem. The HFY had grown tired of waiting. Their insectoid nature demanded action and conquest rather than the patient siege strategy preferred by the crystalline Veltar. Foster's translations showed that HFY commanders were demanding permission to begin surface attacks immediately. They argued that 4 months of blockade had achieved nothing except to give humans time to adapt and organize resistance. The gaseous Morthdal took an even more extreme position. Their alien psychology viewed humanity as a cancer that needed to be removed completely from the galaxy. They favored using planet-killing weapons to sterilize Earth and eliminate the human threat permanently. The Morthdal saw no value in trying to contain or control a species they considered fundamentally chaotic and dangerous. Only the Veltar still believed in their original containment strategy. Their rigid logical thinking suggested that humans would eventually surrender when faced with inevitable defeat. But even among the crystalline beings, doubts were growing about whether the siege could be maintained indefinitely without significant losses. Dr. Nina Walsh received the final component deliveries from resistance cells around the world and began assembling the most ambitious weapon system in human history. Project Phoenix had evolved from a simple reverse engineering effort into something that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. The global network of resonance amplifiers was nearly complete and ready to channel Earth's magnetic field into a focused pulse that could disrupt alien gravity technology. The physics behind the weapon defied conventional understanding. Walsh's team had discovered that Earth's magnetic field could be manipulated using modified alien components arranged in specific geometric patterns. The amplifiers would create a standing wave effect that turned the planet itself into a massive electromagnetic weapon capable of overloading alien systems across the entire solar system. Colonel Parker's surface teams worked frantically to install the final amplifiers in major cities around the world. Each device had to be precisely positioned and carefully calibrated to match the magnetic field variations at its location. The work was dangerous because alien patrols had increased their surveillance activities as tensions within their coalition mounted. Tony Garcia and his demolitions team had the most challenging assignment. They needed to place an amplifier in the ruins of Tokyo where alien forces maintained their largest ground base. The device would need to be hidden within a kilometer of enemy positions and activated remotely when the global pulse began. Garcia's team spent 3 days moving through the rubble-filled streets and avoiding alien patrols before finding a suitable location in the basement of a collapsed skyscraper. Amy Clark provided overwatch from sniper positions as teams installed. amplifiers in London, Paris, and Moscow. Her rifle had been modified with alien targeting technology that allowed her to engage enemy forces at distances that would have been impossible with purely human equipment. She had become a ghost that struck without warning and vanished before alien forces could respond. On New Horizons station engineer Lisa Campbell worked with Captain Morrison to prepare for the most dangerous part of the operation. When the global pulse fired, it would disrupt alien gravity weapons, but it would also knock out most human electronics within the affected area. The orbital station would need to survive the electromagnetic storm and be ready to break through the alien blockade when their ships began falling from orbit. Campbell had spent weeks hardening the station's critical systems against electromagnetic interference. She had created Faraday cages around the life support equipment and installed backup power systems that could function during the pulse. The station's engines had been modified with alien components that would hopefully continue working when human technology failed. Dr. Alex Turner monitored alien communications from his translation center and watched the enemy coalition tear itself apart. The HFY had begun moving ships into attack positions without waiting for Veltar approval. The Morthdal were charging their planet-killing weapons and issuing ultimatums to their allies. The Veltar struggled to maintain order as their carefully planned siege strategy collapsed into chaos. Sarah Kim escaped from her alien prison during the confusion caused by the Coalition's internal conflicts. Her psychological insights had taught her to recognize the patterns in Veltar behavior, and she had learned to predict when the guards would be distracted by urgent communications from their commanders. She stole an alien shuttle and crashed it in the ruins of Seattle, where human resistance fighters found her and brought her to the nearest underground facility. The intelligence she provided about alien psychology proved invaluable during the final preparations. Kim explained that the HFY Empire depended on absolute coordination between its member species. Any disruption to their command structure would cause cascading failures throughout their forces. The key was to strike when their attention was focused on internal disputes rather than external threats. Walsh coordinated the timing of the global pulse to coincide with the peak of alien coalition tensions. Foster's communication intercepts showed that all three species would be engaged in heated negotiations at exactly midnight Greenwich Mean Time. Their command ships would be focused on diplomatic channels rather than monitoring human activities. The resonance amplifiers came online one by one as resistance teams around the world completed their final preparations. Each device required careful synchronization with the others to create the standing wave effect that would channel Earth's magnetic field into a coherent pulse. The slightest timing error could cause the entire system to fail, or worse, create an uncontrolled feedback loop that might damage the planet's magnetic field permanently. Morrison felt the weight of humanity's survival pressing down on him as he watched the countdown timer approach 0. In less than 6 hours, the most desperate gamble in human history would either free Earth from alien domination or destroy any hope of resistance. There would be no second chances and no opportunity to try again if the weapon failed. The alien ships continued their ominous dance in orbit while their crews argued about humanity's fate. None of them suspected that far below their positions, desperate humans were preparing to turn their own planet into a weapon. The HFY Empire had spent 4 months demonstrating their technological superiority, but they were about to learn that sometimes the most primitive solution was also the most effective. Earth itself was about to join the fight for humanity's freedom. The HFY broke ranks first, like a dam bursting under too much pressure, and their insectoid warriors screamed through Earth's atmosphere in ships that looked like massive flying beetles covered in weapons and rage. The alien coalition shattered as 4 months of careful planning dissolved into chaos when the aggressive species decided they could wait no longer for permission to attack. Their assault ships dove toward major population centers, while the Veltar frantically broadcast orders that no one was listening to anymore. Captain Morrison watched the enemy formation collapse through his telescopes and felt his heart race. as he realized this was the moment they had been waiting for. The alien fleet was distracted by internal conflicts and focused on managing their rogue allies rather than monitoring human activities. He opened a channel to Dr. Walsh's command center far below and spoke the words that would either save humanity or doom it forever. The resonance amplifiers activated simultaneously across the globe as resistance teams in dozens of cities pressed their triggers at exactly midnight Greenwich Mean Time. The devices hummed to life and began channeling Earth's magnetic field through modified alien components that had never been designed to handle such massive amounts of chaotic energy. The planet itself became a weapon as electromagnetic forces that had protected Earth for millions of years were focused into a single devastating pulse. Engineer Lisa Campbell felt the station shake around her as the pulse passed through space like an invisible tidal wave of disrupted physics. The electromagnetic storm knocked out half their systems instantly, but the hardened equipment she had prepared continued functioning even as alien ships throughout the solar system began experiencing catastrophic failures. Their elegant gravity, manipulation technology could not handle the chaotic energy signature that human desperation had created. The first alien ships began falling from orbit within minutes as their gravity drives failed in spectacular cascades of light and twisted metal. The crystalline Veltar vessels lost cohesion and broke apart like glass sculptures dropped from great heights. The insectoid HFY attack ships tumbled out of control as their navigation systems failed and their weapons powered down. Even the gaseous Morthdal craft began venting atmosphere as their containment fields collapsed. Dr. Nina Walsh monitored the pulse from her underground command center and watched as energy readings spiked beyond anything her instruments could measure. The resonance amplifiers were working exactly as designed, but the power levels involved were so enormous that several of the devices began overloading. She sent emergency shutdown commands to the most stressed amplifiers while keeping enough online to maintain the electromagnetic disruption field. Colonel Parker emerged from the tunnels beneath Chicago and led his teams in a desperate assault on grounded alien positions. The enemy forces that had seemed invincible just hours earlier were now struggling with malfunctioning equipment and disrupted communications. Demolitions expert Tony Garcia used human explosives to destroy alien gravity weapons that could no longer defend themselves, while sniper Amy Clark picked off confused alien soldiers from impossible distances. The HFY, who had broken from orbit, found themselves fighting a ground war against humans who no longer had anything to lose. Their attack ships crashed in cities around the world where resistance fighters immediately swarmed the wreckage to capture alien technology and weapons. The insectoid warriors were deadly in close combat, but their sophisticated targeting systems had been disabled by the electromagnetic pulse, and they fought nearly blind. Captain Morrison seized the moment of chaos and launched New Horizons Station toward the gaps that were opening in the alien blockade. The orbital facility had never been designed for combat maneuvers, but Campbell's modifications allowed it to punch through the failing siege ring while alien ships tumbled helplessly around them. Morrison felt tears on his cheeks as he saw open space beyond Earth's orbital zone for the first time in 4 months. The Veltar attempted to restore order to their coalition, but their command ships were just as vulnerable to electromagnetic disruption as their gravity weapons. The crystalline beings who had conquered dozens of star systems found themselves unable to coordinate their forces or even communicate effectively with their scattered fleet elements. Their perfect technological harmony had become a fatal weakness when faced with human chaos. Computer specialist Ben Foster intercepted frantic alien transmissions as enemy commanders tried to understand what had happened to their invincible fleet. The Kethvar had never encountered a species that would turn their own planet into a weapon or use their electromagnetic field as an offensive tool. Their tactical databases contained no protocols for dealing with enemies who fought with such primitive but effective methods. Sarah Kim coordinated with resistance leaders around the world and helped them exploit the psychological weaknesses. she had discovered in alien thinking. The Kethvar Empire depended on predictable behavior and logical responses, but humans were doing neither. They were attacking when retreat made more sense and defending positions that had no strategic value. The aliens could not adapt to opponents who ignored their own military doctrine. The Morth Doll made one final desperate attempt to use their planet-killing weapons before the human pulse completely disabled their systems. Their massive destroyer ships began charging weapons that could crack continents and boil oceans, but the electromagnetic interference caused critical failures in their targeting computers. The weapons fired randomly into space instead of at Earth, and several Morth Doll ships were destroyed by their own misdirected firepower. Walsh felt the resonance amplifiers begin to burn out one by one as they reached the limits of their alien components. The human modifications had pushed the technology far beyond its design parameters, and the devices were literally tearing themselves apart from the energy they were channeling. But they had done their job, and the alien fleet was crippled beyond any hope of quick recovery. Morrison established contact with Admiral Brooks on the surface and coordinated the first human counterattack since the siege began. Resistance fighters, armed with captured alien weapons, emerged from their hiding places and began hunting down the scattered enemy forces. The humans who had been trapped and helpless for 4 months suddenly found themselves holding the tactical advantage for the first time. The siege ring that had imprisoned humanity began collapsing as more alien ships lost power and fell toward Earth's atmosphere. The Kethvar Empire had brought overwhelming technological superiority to bear against what they considered a primitive species, but they had not prepared for enemies who would sacrifice everything, including their own planet's magnetic field, to win a single battle. Earth's electromagnetic field began returning to normal as the resonance amplifiers shut down, but the damage to alien forces was permanent. Hundreds of enemy ships drifted powerless in space, while their crews struggled to restore basic life support systems. The perfect coordination that had made the Kethvar Empire so effective had been shattered by 4 months of human desperation and creativity. The species that the aliens had dismissed as chaotic and primitive had just proven that sometimes chaos was exactly what the situation required. The wreckage of alien ships covered Earth's surface like metallic snow, and humanity emerged from their underground shelters to find a transformed world where the hunters had become the hunted. Colonel Parker led combined forces of resistance, fighters and regular military units in systematic strikes against the scattered Kethvar positions that remained operational after the electromagnetic pulse. The aliens who had seemed invincible just days earlier now found themselves desperately defending crash sites and temporary bases against human forces equipped with captured alien technology. Captain Morrison established the first human orbital facility using components salvaged from disabled enemy vessels. New Horizons Station became the foundation for a larger complex as teams of engineers led by Lisa Campbell worked around the clock to reverse engineer alien faster than light drives and gravity manipulation systems. The technology that had been used to imprison humanity would now serve as the key to their expansion beyond Earth's solar system. The HFY fought with desperate fury in the ruins of major cities, but their sophisticated weapons and targeting systems remained crippled by electromagnetic interference. Demolitions expert Tony Garcia discovered that human explosives were remarkably effective against alien armor when the enemy's defensive fields were offline. Sniper Amy Clark coordinated teams of marksmen who picked off alien soldiers from positions the enemy could no longer detect with their damaged sensors. Dr. Nina Walsh began the massive task of cataloging and studying the alien technology that had fallen into human hands. Entire Veltar command ships had crashed intact, and their crystalline data cores contained information about dozens of star systems and hundreds of alien species. The Kethvar Empire had dominated this region of the galaxy for thousands of years, but their own records would now guide humanity's first steps into interstellar space. The remaining alien forces attempted to coordinate a withdrawal, but their command structure had been shattered along with their technology. The three species that had formed the coalition began blaming each other for the catastrophic defeat, and several firefights broke out between former allies as they competed for functional escape pods and working spacecraft. The unity that had made them strong had become another weakness that humans could exploit. Computer specialist Ben Foster worked with Dr. Alex Turner to establish communication with the demoralized alien survivors. The enemy forces that remained on Earth were trapped and outnumbered with no hope of rescue from their scattered fleets. Foster broadcast surrender terms in the musical language of the Kethvar, while Turner prepared translation protocols for what would become humanity's first formal diplomatic contact with alien civilizations. The negotiations were brief and decisive. The Veltar who had initiated the siege were forced to recognize human sovereignty over Earth's solar system and agree to complete withdrawal of all Kethvar forces. The aliens would be allowed to leave in the few ships that remained functional, but they would never return to human space. Any violation of the agreement would result in immediate resumption of hostilities, with weapons the aliens now knew they could not counter. Sarah Kim served as a psychological advisor during the surrender talks and helped human negotiators understand the alien mindset that had led to this conflict. The Kethvar Empire viewed chaos as a fundamental threat to galactic order, and they genuinely believed that containing humanity had been necessary for the greater good. Their defeat had shattered that worldview and left them struggling to comprehend how their superior civilization had been beaten by primitives. Admiral Brooks emerged from her command bunker to oversee the establishment of Earth's new planetary defense grid. The captured alien technology would be integrated with human engineering to create defensive systems that could protect the solar system from future invasions. But defense was no longer enough for a species that had tasted victory against impossible odds. Humanity was ready to take their place among the stars as conquerors rather than victims. Morrison launched the first human expedition beyond the solar system using a hybrid ship built from alien components and human innovation. The vessel carried a crew of volunteers, including several former resistance fighters who were eager to explore the galaxy that had tried to cage them. Their destination was a nearby star system that alien records indicated contained habitable worlds and primitive alien civilizations. The galaxy watched nervously as humanity began expanding beyond their home system with an aggressiveness that surprised even their former enemies. Species that had heard rumors about the defeat of the Kethvar Empire now faced the reality of human ships appearing in their home systems. The beings who had been dismissed as chaotic primitives just months earlier were now recognized as a major threat to the established galactic order. Dr. Walsh coordinated the construction of shipyards in orbit around Earth and began mass production of human vessels equipped with reverse-engineered alien technology. The ships were crude by Kethvar standards, but they incorporated the redundancy and adaptability that had proven so effective during the siege. Human engineering created vessels that could function even when damaged, and crews that could improvise solutions to problems that would cripple more sophisticated designs. The underground resistance networks that had saved humanity during the siege became the foundation for an intelligence service that gathered information about alien civilizations throughout the region. Former fighters like Tony Garcia and Amy Clark became the core of special operations teams that could infiltrate alien worlds and gather strategic intelligence. The skills they had learned during the desperate months of the siege now served humanity's expansion into hostile territory. Within a year of the siege's end, human colonies were established on worlds that had never seen intelligent life, and human exploration fleets were pushing deeper into regions that the Kethvar Empire had considered their exclusive domain. The species that had been trapped on a single world was now spreading across dozens of star systems with the rapid growth that had originally terrified their alien enemies. The former members of the Kethvar coalition found themselves dealing with a transformed strategic situation where humanity was no longer a problem to be contained, but a force to be reckoned with or avoid it entirely. The Veltar retreated to their core worlds and began fortifying their borders against human expansion. The HFY sought alliance with other aggressive species in hopes of mounting a counterattack. The Morthdell simply vanished into deep space rather than risk another confrontation. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of humanity's first true starship and watched alien suns grow larger in the view screen as his crew prepared to establish contact with another civilization. The siege that was meant to end human expansion had instead accelerated it beyond anything the galaxy had seen before. The chaotic species that threatened galactic order had proven that sometimes chaos was exactly what the universe needed to break free from stagnation and fear. Earth's children were spreading to the stars, and nothing would ever be the same again.